Wanted to show you today one of my hobbies, aside from just having and playing with knives and reviewing them. I also like to carve them. So these are all wood carvings that I've made. Let's get the stupid one out of the way. This is just kind of a gross messer style blade. Pretty ugly. This was actually the very first one I ever carved. Moving on. This was I actually modeled this after a Gilhibben Magnum, with the exception of I stretched the length of it by maybe 4 inches and then put more of a curvature back on the handle, as well as, now the Gilhibben does have this churl, but I made the churl perfectly round all the way instead of the partially rounded way that they've got it. But anyway, so this one's more of a short pirate saber style. And if you're wondering where the color comes from, obviously I either stain or paint and then polyurethane. This was modeled after, oh, you remember the video I showed you of the black bear buoy? I actually just took the pattern of the shape of that black bear buoy and I put it into this carving. This is the exact dimensions in profile. This is the exact dimensions of the black bear buoy from this direction. Obviously it's way fatter. But I do that so that you can actually play with them without breaking them. You know, you could whack this on stuff without breaking it. This is actually my favorite one that I've made. This is a Kukri. And what I've started calling it is my Kukri Club. This is sort of like an old African war club. Now this one's only made out of pine. In fact, I think all of these are made out of pine so far. But the African War Club was a concept that, it was just a skull cracker. And this guy is heavily coated in polyurethane, although it is pine, which pine is a fairly soft wood comparatively to other harder woods. That is my favorite. It's the most fun to play with and hold. It was the most fun to make. I actually spent the longest on it. And I also wanted to keep the nice, pretty blonde color of the wood there. Also made sort of a short gladius, or a rudius, actually, if you consider the old Roman concept. The gladius, if it was a wooden gladius, it would be called a rudius, and it was a symbol of freedom. Now this is more of a knife size than that, and I just free-handed this one completely from scratch, so it is a little wonky and weird, but anyway. And then finally, this was the second one I made. You can tell it's not the greatest. I just stained the entire thing in dark walnut, and it's really, once again, a free-handed blade style that I came up with. One of the reasons I started doing this was because I like the idea of wooden carved blades for kids as toys. When I was a kid, I had something very similar to this, not painted or stained, but just it was similar to this, and I played with that thing every day until I broke it, and I do remember it being one of my favorite toys. Now, what I'm going to do next is I am going to take different styles of wood. my mat says go away. Anyway, so here I've got some wood examples. Today what I want to do is I want to take a piece of sycamore. Now, sycamore is higher up the hardness scale from pine. So a piece like this can make something a little harder than these pine things that I've just showed you. What I want to do today, though, is I want to make, out of this sycamore, I want to make a Mini Lucille. Do you know what I mean when I say Lucille? What I'm talking about is The Walking Dead, the choice weapon of Negan. So I'm going to take this piece of sycamore. I'm going to make kind of a miniature bat out of it, sort of a one-handed mini bat. I'm going to wrap it with barbed wire after I get the whole thing shaped up like a bat. So, alright, first I'm going to start sanding on it. I know that a lathe would have been better, but I do not have a lathe of my own. So I'm going to use this power sander to start rounding it out. Honestly, I bet it's going to be really hard. Let's find out. Okay, so I just sanded for about 30 minutes. And the reason I'm not showing every last bit of it is just because, I mean, why on earth would I sit there and film the entire time if I'm gonna spend literally hours? This is gonna take hours. But, so I'm gonna turn the camera on every once in a while and give sort of a progress report. About 30 minutes of sanding has rendered not a ton of progress. However, we are starting to see the bottom of the handle sort of take shape. Okay, so another 30 or so minutes of sanding has rendered this. Handle's a little more shaped, although I still need to get it thinner. But it's starting to round out throughout. So that's the progress. This is roughly 1 hour worth of sanding on what was a perfectly square chunk of lumber. It is actually starting to look a little bit like a bat. Mini Lucille coming right up. Another progress update. That was another 20, 30 minutes of sanding. As you can see, it's beginning to round out all around. It is still a little bit square towards the tip here, but it is starting to be able to just roll. And by the way, this club, it's heavy. Sycamore is heavier than pine and much harder. I know I've already said that, but when you go to sand it, you can tell it's a much harder wood than pine. In fact, I think on the wood hardness index, I think sycamore is close to double the hardness of pine. What? Little Lucille's starting to look pretty good. It's pretty cool, man. This is gonna be fun. It is almost round. There's still just a little bit of rounding to do. All right, so I'm done with the rough shaping. And now I've got this higher grain, 320 grain sandpaper, and I'm hand sanding from here. And, it feels smooth. Once you get that really fine grain sandpaper going, makes it really smooth. All right, so now I've got the little bat smoothed and round. And so now I've hung it up here with a mic stand and some gear ties so that I can go ahead and start painting it. I mean, clear coating it. I'm gonna use polyurethane. And I've hung it this way because if I clamp it in the vise, it'll scar the wood. So I just kind of lightly hang it with some soft gear ties, and then I rearrange it each time I do a new coat. So that's the next step. I'll show you when I finish that step. Okay, so the first coat of polyurethane has gone on. It's just a gloss clear coat. I used the only brush I could find out here, and that's what that stuff looks like. And I just painted it on. So now I'm gonna let this coat dry, then I'm gonna rearrange the bat so that it hangs in a different way and put on the next coat. All right, little Lucille is looking pretty shiny. This is 2 coats. I used these little gear ties kind of as a stand like this, just to keep it elevated so I could get to most of it, and this way then I can just rearrange it like this, do the opposite side. So anyway, that's the second coat of clear coat. I'm about to do a third coat and then probably let that one dry, probably do a 4th coat. All right, it's time to Neganize this little beast. Now what we're gonna do, see I've got my barbed wire stretched out here. I've stretched it out to, I don't know, 12 feet, something like that. And so the next step is I'm gonna cut that end and then I'll show you what's next. Okay, so the next step here is to use fencing staples. Now these aren't real ones, I actually made these out of nails. I just bent them in half and sharpened the straight part. But I'm gonna use those. And what you do is you take your bit of barbed wire, you wrap it over the top. So let me bend it appropriately here. Get it bent pretty good. So then I'm gonna wrap it over the top like this. Get it nice and tight like this. I'm gonna turn this barb so it's not in the way there. Okay. So I get it wrapped really tight like this right here. And then I'm gonna send one of these right into the top there with a hammer. So here we go. Kind of hurts my heart actually to send a nail into this bat. This is the only bat I've ever made, so anyway, here we go. It's like a mighty off-screen struggle over here. Like this. So you can see that. There's the tip. So you wrap it over the top like that with some hanging down on that side. Then we'll get ready to wrap it around. Okay, so the next step is I've got the other end of the wire in my wimpy little vise here, and I'm going to take this and I'm going to go over here and get it all stretched all the way to the extent that it can stretch between here and there, get it nice and tight, and then just start rolling it on. Okay, so the next thing I did, I wrapped it, I threw a clamp on it because I couldn't get it hammered in while holding the pressure on the wrap. So I clamped it so that I can go ahead and get it hammered. So I'm going to go ahead and hammer it now. I'm not going to film it though. There's too much going on already. I need 3 or 4 hands. So I'll show you here in a second. I am thrilled by how this turned out. This is so cool. I understand it doesn't quite look like Negan's Lucille. Not exactly. But man, what a mean little club this has turned into. And yeah, the process of wrapping did actually scar up the bat under the barbed wire, but you know, what are you going to use this for anyway? You're going to smash things with it, so it's not like it's going to stay beautiful and pristine. But man, that is just that is a terrible little thing. Oh man, sycamore. Anyway, next thing I'm going to do here, just to make this even meaner than it already is, I'm going to grab some pliers, and on any of these barbs that are kind of laying flat, I'm going to turn them out. I want this thing to be a prickly cactus of a Lucille. I want those barbs poking out in every direction, so I'm going to do that. I decided to go ahead and make a couple more of these, which are just nails that I've cut the heads off of with a bolt cutter, then bent them in half, and then I'm going to nail them in here. The reason is I just want a couple more anchor points on the bat to really solidify and hold this wrap in place. Okay, so you remember at the first of the video when I showed you all my blade style carvings? So, finally, today, added in to the mix of wooden handmade weapons is the Mini Lucille. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I'd say easily, out of all of these, that Mini Lucille, definitely the most dangerous. Man, this was cool. It sure was cool to make this. A lot of fun. As you can see, I turned a lot of the barbs outwards, as many as I could reach. A lot of them are actually buried, but also, as you can see there in the middle, I put more fencing staples, or in other words, nails bit in half and sharpened. So, that is the conclusion of the Mini Lucille build. That's the video for today. Hope you guys have enjoyed it. We'll see you next time.